I suppose if you are a banking boss seeking to avoid a banking tax at next week's budget, you might not want your results to look, as absolutely bumper as some of them do look. But then you probably have to get into the politics of whether this government does want to hit the banks with such a tax.
Well, that neatly brings us to my next question. Does the government want to hit banks with tax, or what are people in the city thinking about when we're looking ahead to the budget next week?
I think it's really hard to know if the Labour Party will hit the banks with a... Of course, banks will say to you that they already pay a whole load of extra taxes, and they do. They pay specific taxes on their sector. I think it's unlikely that they will do it with this budget. I think they might do it at some point, but I think they might leave it this time round. And not least, the government is incredibly keen to work with the banks to get all this money pumped into the real economy. So while banks would definitely still be able to do that, I actually think the government is on a sort of fairly pro-bank path, and we're going to hear more about that probably in the Mansion House speech in November. And I think really they want to do everything they can to encourage the banks to lend.
I mean, you had that fantastic Big Take report where there was the warning of exodus of wealth from the UK after this budget. And then we had all of the big ministers, from business to Reeves to Keir Starmer himself, saying if not, there won't be a wealth exodus, that there shouldn't be a wealth exodus. How has that changed since then when you've been speaking to people? Are they worried? Are they optimistic? Are they accepting of what's going to come on Wednesday? Accepting, I say, in the sense that maybe it's needed to get growth.
Yeah, I think that the kind of wealthy are quietly optimistic about next week, which is, I mean, they've obviously been on a huge journey over this whole topic of their taxes. So someone very senior in the private equity industry said to me yesterday that a year ago, if they had been offered 35% on their carried interest tax, they would have signed up enthusiastically. The rate is currently 28%. But that now, this person said, if next week Rachel Reeves comes up with 35% on carry, they'll be cross. And I thought it was a really good point, and it reflects the kind of psychodrama that everyone's been involved with, that it looked tough, and that more recently this sense that Labour is sort of coming back again, moderating their view, mainly because they've been told, it seems, by the kind of Treasury number crunchers, that a certain level will be counterproductive. People will leave. We don't know what that level is. We don't know. And obviously it's just modelling, but no one really knows. We're all kind of guessing. But I think people think on that tax, for example, which is obviously just a kind of drop in the ocean really compared to a lot of things, we might be looking at something in the low 30s perhaps.
Okay, well, that's be an interesting one to watch. But you do point to kind of an important journey that we've all been on the very long road, as it feels like, to this budget as well. That we had the very much the negative rhetoric coming out of the government immediately after the election, and that sort of got us to where we are now, where things are starting to crystallise. I mean, on balance, from the people that you're speaking to in the city and financial services, are they more optimistic, more pessimistic about next week?
I think they're more optimistic. I suppose it sort of depends on compared to when kind of thing. But I think they probably are a bit more optimistic. On the whole, I think the city does understand and probably broadly supports this idea she's going to redefine debt, and understands her points about the need to invest properly. I think they like the fact that she is signalling very clearly what she's going to do on that, because everyone's desperate to avoid a Liz Truss mini budget debacle. Obviously it's set up for all the headlines, it being the 30th of October, the day before Halloween. So everyone's keen to avoid those mistakes.